the demands on the product type are less than you'd expect with a car. We don't have expectations to cruise at 100 kilometers an hour for 500 kilometers. Over that year of operation, we will actually save somewhere around $1,000 in petrol.
Yeah.
Okay. But the biggest saving is actually in the servicing side of it. That company actually produces something like 11 million units a year. Okay, so the Duo, we can make 1,200 a day. You know, what's the likelihood of someone buying an EV and going back? And there's plenty of reports where people going, there's no way I'm going to get another ICE car or anything like that.
So Ben, thank you ever so much for agreeing to be on Motoring Chronicles. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So tell me, what products and services do you offer here at Benzina Zero?
Yeah, so Benzina Zero is basically now a full stack micromobility business. We started with electric mopeds and motor scooters, road registered vehicles, and we've been diversifying through vehicles that don't require registration and license now. We probably came out of the industry from being a retailer and obviously developing our own product, our own brand. And for those at home, I always make sure people understand that my name, Ben, has nothing to do with Benzina. Some people wonder about that, but Benzina is actually petrol in Italian, and zero means we don't use any petrol. So that's why we're electric.
Okay. You've had a successful few years since founding the company. What was it that inspired you and Joe, your partner, to establish Benzina Zero?
Oh, definitely because we started in the road registered moped space. We had always seen the merits of the vehicle type. You have a vehicle that has got a small form, which means it helps with congestion. It's fantastic when it comes to being multi-purpose, and that's where the Duo, which is our Halo product, really is something that is quite unique, and I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about some of the corporate stuff we do.
Yeah.
But it's also probably one of the easier forms of mobility to electrify. And what I mean by that is the demands on the product type are less than you'd expect with a car. We don't have expectations to cruise at 100 kilometers an hour for 500 kilometers. All these vehicles do is short form distance, and that could be both for commuters or for business.
Right.
So it made a lot of sense, but we also saw a bit of a need around having a proper delivery style of vehicle where inherently in the past, people would have taken a scooter that looks like a Vespa, put a rack and a box in the back and said, there's a delivery vehicle, but the form was underutilized. So that's where the Duo came out of. And we were also retailers. So we'd retailed just shy of 20,000 motor scooters into Southeast Queensland, sort of through the noughties.
Yeah.
And then obviously that we then pivoted at seeing the product type and merit of the product type, and then electric was coming. And that was back in 2018. And then we founded the company in 2019.
Yeah. So was there the bit that caught you? Was it the retail, the sort of fleet type idea, or was there sort of real community interest in going in electric scooters and bikes? And
I think we go backwards a little bit in time. We'll go back to 2018. Electric was very new then as well. And that was new for cars, which probably has a broader mass take up. Electrification of two wheels is probably more challenging, especially when it comes to like the higher end motorbikes.
Sure.
But we just saw an opportunity to have a product that had just high levels of utility, and then that could be utilized for both commercial applications but private one, because we think the form of the Duo is like beautiful in its own way, because it is quite unique. But I think it's one of those things where we had such an interest in that style and product, and then maybe not necessarily going, this is the right product for this particular use case. We could just see it being the right bike for so many use cases.
Yeah.
Probably where we started.
Okay. So can you outline the growth of the business since you started? You started with essentially the Duo, and what about the product growth, the incoming product, and the growth of the business since then?
Yeah, cool. We like I said, we did start in that road register space. We also have to say that we started in 2019. So naturally, by April 2020, all our plans had been put in disarray through COVID and all this sort of stuff. And by the time we developed our prototypes and to actually delivering our first prototypes was actually a period of about 18 months.
Yeah.
It's funny when you look back at this because I don't know what we did for 18 months. We did something. We were very busy. So, but it was one of those things where, that sometimes these challenges pop up like, no, I never saw this was going to happen. We went through, I guess, a process at that stage of thinking a bit more about the product type. And obviously the Duo was a halo product. But we also were aware that, it wasn't a conventional looking moped or motor scooter. And we then started diversifying into other product lines. And that's when we developed the City and the Vasto, which is named after our head office location in Italy, but also the Sport, which is our 80k an hour bike. And then I guess as we moved through, we brought those vehicles in, we'd established a dealer network, and we officially launched in 2022. And subsequent to that, every year, we've bolted in another product line, and I call it like a product category. So we started with road-based mopeds, motor scooters in 22. In 23, we brought in a range of e-scooters. And when I say the word e-scooter, it can get a bit confusing to moped.
Sure.
So we'll call that a PMD, or a personal mobility device.
Okay.
So, and then and this year, literally about a month ago, we just brought in a range of e-bikes. So we have the Bender, which is a folding e-bike, and the Area 51, which is an off-limits private property fun machine. It was on one more to launch just very soon. So,
care to elaborate on what that might be?
Yeah, it's called a hauler, or we call it the hauler, and it does what it says it says the name is, and it's going to be a cargo bike.
Okay.
So it's going to be multi-purpose for both consumers and also for some of our fleet customers.
So does that cover all bases for you in terms of two-wheeled options for retail and corporate customers? Is there any other sort of range or model?
We might expand a category. Yes, we don't believe that we're going to expand category types. So there's not going to be a Benzina Zero range of stand-up electric skateboards or anything like that. I know we've got examples around the place here, but really it's not in our remit. We love two wheels.
Yeah.
And it's more like if we do another type of e-bike, or if we do another type of e-scooter or something like that, that'll be probably where we'll expand. And we are looking at a really a much higher speed version of the Duo, which we'll call the Max.
Okay. Yeah. So the part of the appeal and the hook, I guess, for the Benzina Zero products has appeared to be its flexibility. So for the Duo, especially, I think you can do quite a lot with it. You can hang things off it. You can put boxes on it. You can, it's quite a clever piece of kit, actually, in that respect. Is that the sort of something that you look in all the products that you produce?
Yeah, look, I think especially around that particular product type, and probably also going to the other extent, the hauler, which will be our latest, the new e-bike that's coming, is something that's going to have one kind of vehicle that has multiple uses is actually beneficial.
Yes.
Because you might have multiple customer types, but then you can have one customer who can have it for multiple uses.
Right.
We've had some people who go and do Uber Eats riding around on a Duo, but then they throw on instead of taking the storage box off the back and then put a pillion seat, and they take their partner for a ride. Like we have a bike that's highly functional. And I think what it's done now is it's really opened up. People are only limited really by their imagination.
Yeah.
And what they want to use the product type for.
Yeah.
Our e-bike range is going to be the same. And even the V50, our little seated e-scooter, we've been able to take essentially a really nice little seated e-scooter package, really, really small and compact. We've been able to utilize it in other senses as well, because they actually have, they're not just one party trick, you know what I mean? They can do multiple things. And I think that's would always be the core of our portfolio. So, I think that's probably the best way to answer it. But essentially, the more utility we can get out of one thing, the better.
Yeah. Okay. The Australian market, both from corporate businesses and the public, I'm assuming through the success of Benzina Zero, that this is a growing trend, that the market's growing for you. So what's driving that, do you think? Are Australians becoming more open to adopting electric mobility vehicles in general for personal and commercial use? What factors do you think are influencing that sort of decision that they're making?
Look, I think if we go overall in terms of the EV world, probably start with cars, right? Because this is where the mainstream will always be.
Yeah.
And we've seen year-on-year growth despite the headlines, but there is actually good EV growth. There's a lot of options coming to market. They're now becoming more available to people, and it also starts opening up people's eyes to what other alternatives there are. Because sometimes they don't realize there's an electric moped.
Yeah.
That they're familiar with an e-scooter or they're familiar with an e-bike. And those markets, e-bikes especially, are growing at a high rate of knots.
Okay.
And that's because, obviously, they're functional. They can use them to go down to the shops, or they can go for a ride because it's fun. Like they've got these multiple purposes out of the one vehicle. The other thing that we've seen is definitely there is a tailwind for e-product that allows mobility, but without rego and licensing. That lowers the barrier to entry, I guess, for a lot of people. You can go buy an e-bike for the same price as an e-moped, but you need to register the moped. I think it is important, though, to just remind ourselves that you do pay rego for a reason, and one of the critical parts of that registration is CTP.
Yes.
And some people were really critical about Queensland. For example, the CTP price went up. I think it was around July last year. Critical because the price went up, but the problem was they included better protections for the rider. We actually have personal injury cover in that product type.
Right.
Yeah, this is one of these things.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there are merits to both. But from a corporate sense, or like from a commercial sense, it just makes sense. Okay. So let's just take off the hat of what people might like in terms of nostalgia and stuff. Going into an e-product just makes financial sense. It's like 90% cheaper to run when it comes to like the energy cost of operation, and it's like 66% cheaper when it comes to maintenance. It just makes sense. And businesses, once they see that and they go, I can actually save this much money, then obviously, in times of inflation and stuff like that, like prices, obviously, it's not always what the customer, or in this case, the company might make. It's what they have to spend to be able to do the job they need to do in the first place. So this is what we're seeing some really good demand. And the other thing is there's also naturally a lead from these big companies like Domino's, where they want to meet, emissions targets. They have ESG processes. We contribute vastly to that because we do tick all those boxes to be able to do low emission delivery, or be able to ensure that we have the appropriate supply chains.
So I think you mentioned it there, but I'll just go back. I mean, when you talk about the financial aspect for a business, I don't know what the comparison is to a petrol-powered machine, but or a specific one. But what sort of savings were you talking about?
So if we went and said, there's a very broad example of a 50cc petrol moped equivalent compared to the Duo. And say that was a delivery vehicle and we did 500 kilometers a week, right? We're talking about 26,000 Ks a year, something like that. Now, just based on very average fuel consumption of about 4 litres per 100. And I think when I did my calculations, it was around $1.80 for petrol, but some places we see it spike up to $2.20, $40, whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
Over that year of operation, we'll actually save somewhere around $1,000 in petrol.
Yeah.
Okay. But the biggest saving is actually in the servicing side of it. So if we think about like an equivalent petrol, like 4-stroke 50cc scooter, which needs a service every 2,500 Ks, over the period of a year, it's going to be around $2,500 worth of servicing if you service by the book. We service less. We service every 4,000 Ks, and that's primarily checks for brakes and tires.
Sure.
When we might get to the end of their actual their service for life. But for us, the service that's involved is a lot less. We're not doing oil changes. There's no oil filters. There's no transmission. There's no belts, rollers, clutches, any of that. It's just so simple. So you're talking nearly $3,500 per year.
Yeah.
The scooter cost $4,500. They pretty much paid it off in year one.
Yeah.
And the other thing as well is that people sometimes don't think about, and they think about service stations or filling up petrol as being convenient. Once you just go back to base, and we work largely with back to base delivery, When you go back to base and plug it in, what else is there to do? You're not having to send a staff member down to the petrol station. You're not having to hold a volatile liquid on site. So there's a lot of other benefits you get, which are both, one of them is time-based and one of them is actually holding petrol on site. So there's actually a lot of other benefits as well.
Yeah.
But from a dollar's perspective, it just makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's astonishing, really. When you come to think about it, you go, well, if it could pay itself off in a year through petrol and servicing savings, that's astonishing.
Yeah. And the other thing as well is let's look at the other benefit of it. If we're using petrol and burning it, we're producing CO2.
Sure.
There's a lot of use cases we have right now where we have, people who are using our bikes, they're just charging everything off solar. And we're using free. But this is the thing. If we're talking about with that power consumption thing before, I was just referring to just Australian grid prices.
Sure.
If we use off solar, then it's totally free.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of benefits outside of even just comparing a plugging into the coal or into the grid or plugging into actually renewable forms of electricity.
Now, and I'm guessing that because naturally the batteries within an e-scooter or e-bike are going to be much smaller than an EV, an electric car, the time it takes to recharge is very, very short in comparison. And so having a solar charging setup is actually not, people will complain about, it's going to take 8 hours to charge my car. In this case, it's...
Well, look, you know what that smaller battery actually leads to is being able to have battery swapping.
Yes,
okay?
Of course.
So if we go down to the battery swapping route, it means that we don't have to have as big a battery in the bike, which means it doesn't have to be as expensive. It doesn't have to be as heavy, which means we don't need to draw as much power from it to be able to power it to go somewhere. Because obviously there's this loop between having performance and then range and then speed and then and all these things together, and it's all dictated by price and quality. So if you can maintain a really decent amount of range, but keep your battery small, it means then maybe the solution here is not the bike that does 200 Ks on a charge, but the bike that does 100 kilometers on a charge like a Duo, and have a spare battery just sitting there fully charged.
Yeah.
So what we can actually do then is we can slow that, like if on a Duo we charge slow, right? We charge about 7 amps. Nice and steady. This is good for battery life. Okay, it's not going to just dump a bunch of power into it and stress it out. It's just going to charge it nice and steady.
Yeah.
What it means is you can just cruise around in the background getting charged. The other one's being used, and then when we need to, 10 seconds, we just swap batteries.
Yeah.
Okay, and then all of a sudden that bike's straight back out. There's no latency anywhere. Nothing's actually waiting to be recharged.
Yeah.
We can also manage that charging stuff, so we can actually recharge, whilst people are on site. We don't necessarily want things recharging when people aren't on site. So it's actually, I think it's a better solution.
Yeah.
And this is one thing back to this sort of format of vehicle. They don't have huge power demands, and then we can then bring in other solutions to actually manage, energy within the bike, which is more cost effective. It also has one other benefit. It is when you have a spare battery somewhere, it means if for some reason one battery didn't work, you still got a spare battery.
Yeah.
So we've got redundancy built in, which is important because a lot of the times when you talk about our corporate stuff, it's, these guys are delivering for a purpose. And if they can't use their vehicle, then they're not able to do the business. So we can keep them up operating all the time, which is a much better outcome.
Yeah. So is that what people are doing? So where people buy one of your bikes, they're getting 2 batteries essentially.
Yeah, it depends on the product type because, and obviously the use case.
Excuse me.
We have, it's funny because there's not really one size fits all. What we do have is a process where we'll understand what people's needs are by going through and talking to them and going through a bit of a discovery process.
Yeah.
That then leads to us sort of tailoring a solution.
Okay.
And that could be, someone who's delivering pizza or someone who's delivering the mail. And we just try to get a really good understanding, and then we'll just go, okay, in your situation, you might need, the bike's going to do the job. Like we've got a couple customers who are mail contractors, but their mail runs 20 kilometers. There's no way that they need a second battery to fulfill the work. Like they won't have to charge the bike for 3 days in their use case. But sometimes we'll have some pizza stores. We have a Domino's store, and in each one of their stores they've taken 2 Duos, but they've got a third battery, so they've always got one spare just in case. Okay, depending on how they run their shifts. So as you can imagine, a pizza store which will run at 10 o'clock in the morning till midnight half the time has a very different demand to a mail contract which might run for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day. Like they're just different beasts. So they're just tailored to what those needs are.
Okay, well, that brings me on to this tailoring of your products, of the products. So we saw that you can do all sorts of stuff with the Duo, especially. And of course, there's the story that we saw quite recently about the tyre product. So let's talk about this tyre thing. It seems to me extremely unusual for a company that's dealing with bikes or vehicles to go, okay, well, let's make our own tyre. I mean, how on earth did that come about?
Well, I probably talked about it a little bit before. Like, we want to be solutions led.
Yes.
And what happens is there's no point, like, it sounds a bit naff, but to be honest, we don't sell bikes. Like, our purpose is not to just sell bikes. Our purpose is actually to facilitate people's challenges, and our products can fit that.
Right.
Okay. So it sounds a bit naff, but it's actually true.
Sure.
And that conversation was coming out of, we were having more and more Australian mail contractors coming on.
Right.
And they really love the format of the bike. And I've had a couple reach out to me and go, look, I've got a really gravelly run and I just want someone that's got a bit more grip. What can we do? And I was like, okay, well, let's go and see if we can source a local product first. We'll go around and dig around and see what's going to fit, the 90-90-12 format on the Duo. Yeah. And we just came up dry. Yeah. We just kept trying. We couldn't find a suitable supply. We just were like, we hit a crossroads, right? This is like anything. We could just give up and go, sorry guys.
Yeah.
But that doesn't help them.
Yeah.
The bike's the right thing for the job, but they needed something a little bit different. And that's where we went, okay, let's look at this. How hard is it to design a tyre?
Yeah.
How hard is it to go through that process and manufacture one? And we just went through the process and then developed the tyre that had the right fit for both on-road and off-road use, like a good intermediate tyre. We also thought about, okay, what are some of the challenges around electric vehicles? And it might be, the rear hub motor has to come off for a puncture. Okay, how can we fix that? Well, let's go from a 2-ply road-based tyre to a 6-ply intermediate tyre. Let's try and reduce the chance of that. Let's get these things worn out before they get a puncture in them. And this is where we then go back to the network and go, guess what, guys, we have a solution for you. And naturally they go, okay, I'll buy some because we've actually fixed their problem.
Yeah.
But you've got to start with listening to what their needs are. And every customer has different needs.
Yeah. Well, again, so that's you find a solution to that particular problem with the tyres, but you're partnering with some quite large companies, as you've mentioned them already, Domino's and well, not necessarily Australia Post, but with contractors for Australia Post. There must be demands that companies like that would expect of their suppliers. So you have to go into there knowing that, okay, we have this product that kind of, I'm not suggesting that these are the right figures, but say meets 70% of their needs. We're going to have to make some accommodations here for specifics that they might want. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. Like, they've definitely got, there's a whole lot of requirements. And look, we're unique, right? So from the Domino's perspective, we're the only preferred supplier who's actually gone through this process, right? For e-bikes, which we're going through with the Hauler now. We've also gone through it with for the V50 for the e-scooter, which we just recently announced, and also the Duo, which was back in May last year, 23. But I guess there's all these different demands within them. And that might be, we have to meet certain branding requirements. So we have to work with branding teams. We have to go through the legal teams. We have to go through ops teams, the safety teams. Now we're going through the I guess like the supply team through an ESG process. We have to make sure that we're compliant across our product lines. And we sort of figure that if we can jump over the highest hurdle, we will naturally be bringing a better product for everyone else.
Yes.
So our product line will be always better because it's tested at the top.
Yes.
Okay. And I think the other thing as well is it then breeds more trust. And I don't necessarily want to think like the Duo is just a delivery bike, because when you strap a surfboard on it and you just go down to the beach and get that Rockstar car park every time, it doesn't necessarily need to feel like it's a delivery vehicle. What it does is it says if it can meet a fleet standard, if it can take the rigors of day-to-day use, timely delivery, all that sort of stuff, it's going to be so adequate. for a consumer to use.
Yeah.
You know,
Interesting. Yeah.
and then if we then go back to that's like a Domino's sort of idea, and we've also got an alignment with Pizza Hut. Now, the good thing is that what we thought we knew about how one company would work, it doesn't necessarily translate to the other company, but we have enough proof and we have enough confidence ourselves in a product to go back and go, hey guys, this is how we can help you. If you need a solution, we've got these solutions. We've seen the work over here, and that keeps sort of like, it's like, the babushka doll. Every time you can take another one out, it feels a little bit like that. Because then we can go to Australia Post, like the mail contractors. So we don't work with the corporate, but we work with the contractor network. And we can say to them, hand on heart, we know this will work. And even within like a Domino's network, we don't always say, you don't have to trust me. Like every time I have a sales chat with someone, it's like, don't trust me. Go talk to the guys who are happy. Here's a testimonial, all that stuff. Go and do your own research, and they always come back. But it's always an outcome where you start getting a little bit of momentum because they can see enough use cases and trust from corporates, and that is actually that's one of their massive differences between us and probably a lot of other brands around, even established brands. We've now got the capacity through some of our alignments, like with Domino's, where we'll then lead back to them with another product, and that's what's happened recently. So, like I said, we started with the Duo and said, here's an electric moped to help you guys do better deliveries. And then we said, well, they've already got a moped and they've got an e-bike. There's something that sort of sits in between them, and that's where we brought in the V50 e-scooter. And if we go back to the solutions that we were trying to provide to them, we wanted to take all the benefits of both those product types, because every product type is a pro and a con, right? Everything's a scale. So you just got to work out, how can we blend this? And we wanted to take the natural benefits of an e-bike, which is no license, no rego. You can get, 16-year-olds to ride them. And then we want to take the benefits of a moped, which is less maintenance. No chains, derailleurs, cables, stuff. And then the V50 was like a really natural fit for that. So what we then did is went, okay, let's develop a system to fit the pizzas into, which is where we were able to develop a pizza box. But once again, we went and designed a pizza box, a 90-litre like molded plastic pizza box. And you go off and you create these things. And once again, that was going to be a solution for a problem that they had. And it's got other benefits for like consumers who want to use a seated e-scooter. But then we took this product type and we led it back to Domino's and said, hey, here's another alternative for you. Let's give you a third vehicle in your repertoire that, is going to meet levels of compliance that it needs to. It's going to be safe. It's going to be comfortable. It's going to be compact. And what's been interesting is, as we went through that process, and as we got the tick off from Domino's Pizza Enterprises here, who manage 12 countries around the world, is the franchisees that we just started delivering this week, they love it. Like I had two guys call me yesterday. He goes, I'm giddy riding this thing. I am so excited about it. And the other thing is the staff are excited.
Yeah.
And here's a benefit. If your staff are excited, they want to use it.
Yeah.
If they want to use it, they're excited about their job, all those things, they take care of it. By being excited and using an e-scooter instead of using a car, there's a lot of other cost benefits. It's cheaper for them to run. The franchisee's happy. So it's this really good little loop, but it comes back to understanding what the people's concerns are, what the challenges are, and trying to find solutions for it.
Yeah. When you are importing stuff into Australia, everybody seems to hit these hurdles with not only the federal sort of national rules and regulations, but then you come down to states and territories, and they've also got their own sort of rules and regulations. I imagine it has been proven to be a massive headache trying to meet everything that you have to meet in Australia to be a national company, be able to provide these products nationally. Is it still a headache, or are things sort of leveling out now and evening out for you?
Every product is different, right?
Oh.
So if we want to talk about e-bikes, e-bikes are probably the simplest.
Yeah.
Okay. I will probably preface there's a lot of e-bikes that are illegal that manage to come into the country.
Sure.
Anyway, but the rules are harmonized. Okay. The taking out the imports of highly like illegal sort of e-bikes or anything like that, or dangerous e-bikes, the rules are harmonized. The use of those bikes are harmonized in terms of ages and all that sort of stuff. Now, there are some rules that are changed. Like, for example, you can't ride an e-bike on the footpath in Victoria.
Right.
You have to ride it on the road.
Mm-hmm.
In Queensland, we can ride the footpath because that's probably the safer place to ride it. But there are little nuances everywhere. If we go into other product types, we have things like a moped, right?
Mm-hmm.
A moped is defined at a federal level as a 50cc petrol scooter or electric equivalent, which is 4,000 watts or less.
Mm-hmm.
That can't exceed 50 kilometers an hour. So that is federally stipulated. But then the use case of that is then state by state.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Queensland, we can ride on a car license. In Western Australia, you can get a moped license when you're 16, the whole year before you get a car license. In New South Wales, you need a motorbike license. So we don't have any harmony there. And to be honest, we've gone through processes, and I think for 40 years, so they've been trying to change the rules of that.
Yeah.
The challenge with the e-product is it blends, like you'll get e-bikes that do 50 Ks an hour easy. What we're seeing is a blending of what is this and what is that and what is this, because essentially we go back to, in the noughties when it was selling, petrol mopeds and stuff like that. If you wanted a small format personal mobility vehicle, you had to buy a moped.
Yeah.
Or otherwise you had a push bike.
Yeah.
Now, if you've got a wheel, you can stick an electric motor into it. So you can make anything with wheels like electric.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing is a grappling. And I think scooters is definitely, like, if you talk about the e-scooters or the PMDs, we're seeing that. Okay, we have federal rules about what a PMD is. 1,250 millimeters long, it can't exceed 25 kilometers an hour. And then we see state-based rules. So up until the 4th of October or 5th of October was this year, you couldn't have an e-scooter that you could sit on. And I've always argued that, like, standing is actually more dangerous than sitting, right? Because no one's ever tripped while they've sat on a chair. But we see benefit in having that product type, but unless the regulators know about it, they can't make the rules about it. In New South Wales, I know they're on a path to legalisation of e-scooters, but currently they've been illegal. There's hundreds of thousands of e-scooters in New South Wales. They're not illegal to own, they're just illegal to use publicly. Now, unfortunately, our Domino's friends can't use the V50 at the moment, but they will when the rules change. But we have all sorts of crazy rules.
Yeah.
Western Australia, they can't weigh more than 25 kilos. Is the police officer going to come up with a set of scales? And I have no idea. But, like, the thing is, like, there's no harmonization, and that's actually to the detriment to the industry. So we want to become, there's actually a association that's being formed, and we want to be a part of that. We've been invited to be part of that because we need to lead and help people at a regulatory perspective to understand what it looks like, because otherwise they might make a rule. And it's not about being favourable to us. It's about what's best for everyone. Sure. And hopefully gaining some level of harmonisation across the states.
So where does that association stand? Is that just starting, people are just starting to talk about putting that together? Yeah,
so that we got approached a couple of months ago about the process, and we just in a very early stage of that, where it's being formed with some founding members, and we've been invited to be a part of that as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. I think that I really ought to ask about the effect that working, we've already sort of mentioned it, the effect of working with large corporations that have certain quality and demands. Excuse me. So you do some R&D work here in Australia, but the manufacturing of the bike is done in China. But you use parts like, as we've spoken about before, the motor is a Bosch motor. Yeah. Can you just talk about the quality of parts and the manufacturing and the R&D sort of stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we are very fortunate. We've got a very small team, but we're incredibly skilled. Like, Joe has a very large amount of engineering background when it comes to, he was actually factory trained also for Lamborghini and Maserati, and he's an all-rounder. Like, he's amazing at what he does. And we're also lucky with our lead tech, Jason, as well. We'll come up with an idea and we can prototype stuff here.
Yeah.
Like the box for the V50 we prototyped here, and then we sent it across to a manufacturer to handle for us. Same thing with the tyre. We went through a sample process, and then we worked with a tyre manufacturer, and all these different solutions. I think it's important to just talk about the manufacturing location.
Yes.
Because sometimes there is a negative connotation about products that can come out of China.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to say it, you can get good products and bad products from anywhere.
Yes.
We believe that, like anything, you will pay for quality. Okay? You can find it anywhere. And the reason why I guess we've been always working out of China from a manufacturing base is twofold. They are leading electrification so much. You want to see an example of that? Just wait for the tidal wave of EV cars that are coming to Australia in the next 12 months.
Yeah.
That's because China pivoted ages ago and has been working through this process. So they've got a really good level of skill, but we've also got like the manufacturing partner we work with on the Duo. That company actually produces something like 11 million units a year. Okay, so the Duo we can make 1,200 a day. We have, we're talking in an Australian perspective here, but I'm sure we'll get into some of the global stuff.
Yes.
We have very large ambitions about requiring that manufacturing capability.
Yes.
And scale is going to be something that's quite a challenge if you go and you meet those sort of orders, or you get those orders and you can't provide it.
Mm.
So we kind of, we're very lucky in how we work. But the other thing is with China's kind of, if you look at a map, it's kind of a middle, which means if we're going to distribute product from our manufacturing partners, it leaves from the center point. If we were sending our bikes from Australia to Italy, it's going to cost substantially more than it's going to cost from China to Italy, or to America, or to wherever else we're sending a product.
Mm.
So there's multiple reasons why we manufacture there, but we can actually manage quality. We've got a guy on the ground in China who works with us exclusively to help us go through and liaise between product and manufacturing partners. Obviously, there's language barriers. There's a whole bunch of reasons why we need to do that, but it's always about quality.
Mm. Mm. So we've talked about regulations and things across the country and across the state. So, but you've got dealers in every state and territory now, right? So could you tell us about those dealers and actually perhaps we could talk about the servicing, how these things get serviced.
Yeah, it's a good question. As you know, Australia's a vast restaurant. It's ridiculous. It's challenging. I drove around the country in 2019, but it's one of those things that's really challenging where, everything looks good on the internet, but we still firmly believe people want to go look, touch, feel.
Yeah.
Not everyone, but there's, as a buyer, I would, and I'm not sure I'm not alone. But we do have dealers across the country. We are actually in every state and territory except for NT, but we are working on solutions up there as well. And, what we would hope to do is have 2 or 3 dealers per capital city, depending on how things work. But we've also got, we just put in our first dealer in Tasmania and Launceston this week. And we've got another one coming online in January down in Hobart. So the dealers are growing. And what's interesting is the dealers who are coming to talk to us now, and we were downstairs before in our showroom area, which is really like a display where we can help people who are looking at setting up a dealership to show them what we could look like.
Yeah.
And what we find is we've got a huge amount of interest in that. We've created like a showroom feel that is really obviously both on brand with Benzina Zero, but it's really affordable to put in.
Mm-hmm.
I'd been involved before this and had a bit of a period of time in the motor industry selling cars between my first lot of scooters and my second lot of scooters, but selling cars. And I was actually in one of the processes where we were doing upgrades to dealerships, which involved the new signage for Holden when they were still here. And I was just staggered at the cost.
Yeah.
A sign that costs $100,000.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, for us, what we want to do is come up with a really nice look, and you can sort of see the look, touch, and feel here just behind us. We wanted to do it at a really cost-effective way. We provide materials downstairs. You'll see posters and all this sort of material that we can use for dealers. And we've actually just recently put on our first standalone Benzina Zero dealer. So independent to us,
okay,
but we've licensed our name with them so they can actually use our set up in the Whit Sundays, and they're called Benzina Zero Whit Sundays.
Nice.
And you will walk into their store and it looks like us.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, and we've been able to replicate this feel obviously around another place. Like you walk into the HQ in Italy, in Vasto,
yeah,
and it feels like this.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah. So actually, that's interesting. The Whit Sundays thing. So that's independent. So somewhere at Whit Sundays, which is, I would guess, is heavily touristy. That's an appeal for the person who set up that business there. Obviously sees the appeal of your bikes for the tourist trade, presumably.
Well, absolutely. But mobility is like universal.
Yeah.
In fact, it's probably getting around places in areas that are regional are actually harder than the city. Metro areas, right?
Yes.
If we think about provided assets like trains and buses and stuff,
Yeah.
if we go out into a regional center and if it's of no reasonable size, like if it's a town of 10,000 people, which is a decent sized town, they don't necessarily have a bus service.
Yeah.
So what happens? Everyone just uses a taxi or an Uber.
Yeah.
And we can see what those challenges are, because this actually can lead into potential support around Indigenous communities, same where they live a little bit out of town. There's no transport system. How can we help people move? And that's one of the things where mobility is universal. You don't have to be an inner city person who likes to go get their coffee to jump on a motor. You could be anywhere.
Yeah,
it's got universal appeal.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting, because naturally, my natural instinct is to think these types of electric bikes and so on, they are naturally going to find a home in big metropolitan and suburban places, not necessarily out in rural areas or regional towns necessarily. I don't know why. I'm not thinking straight, but that's not your thinking, obviously.
Well, it was more of a case of that you only become aware of these things.
Yeah.
I mean, when you start listening to what people's needs are.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, we just released the Bender, which is our folding e-bike. So naturally got a nice lead into people who are like traveling, got motorhomes and caravans and stuff like that. We've been sending Benders everywhere.
Yeah.
Because essentially these people live everywhere, because that's their base where they start touring from.
Yeah.
And go back to them for a second. They'll pull up to a new town, park their motorhome somewhere. They don't want to have to move their home to go get some milk for bread.
Sure.
They need a little mobility solution, and sometimes it's an e-scooter or an e-bike.
Yeah.
E-bikes are easier because at least you don't have to worry about what state you're in to use the thing.
Yes.
So there is some simplicity there, but like it's the same thing. Mobility is universal. Everyone needs to get about.
And did we say that those, back to those dealers? They sell the product, but that's where you go back to get servicing.
Yes.
Once in a blue moon, it seems.
Yeah, it's meant to be low touch, but we support our dealers through both. If they want to set up a retail store and help them with their design, but then we can go through and provide them assets and training on how to actually do any sort of work that's required on the bikes from just like scheduled servicing perspective.
Yeah. Okay.
It's meant to be low touch.
Now, I really want to speak about the international sort of aspect of Benzina Zero. As I recall, it was always on the cards that Italy was going to be somewhere where you would sell the bikes. I seem to remember almost from the start that was going to be something that you would do. And the ambition, and I would gather it has happened since then, that it's much bigger than just here and Italy. It's going all over the place, right?
Yeah, look, there's a few layers in the Benzina Zero story. So I guess largely so far we've been talking about the Australian entity.
Indeed.
That the importing entity that imports their own brand.
Yeah.
And obviously, we go through with all our alignments and dealers and stuff like that. But above that is our global distributor company.
Yeah.
And essentially what Benzina Zero Global does is it goes out and it looks for importers. Now, Australia is a company-owned importer, and Italy is a company-owned importer as well. So we do import our own bikes into Italy. I guess we have a natural affinity for Italy for a couple of reasons. Now, Joe's got Italian heritage. We have an Italian name in our company now.
Of course, sir.
You can see the sort of the feel there. But Italy as a market is quite interesting. It's one of the largest markets in Europe.
Yeah.
Probably the number 1 or 2, depending on where it is with Spain.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's the home of the largest two-wheel motor industry event, the EICMA in Milan every year. So it's an interesting market. We've got a very different setup over there to what we have here in terms of the products we offer. So primarily just Duo at the start, and now we're about to launch V50 and Hauler will be going there very soon, our e-bike. It's a much smaller operation than what we have here, primarily because we send it here in Australia, but naturally it's pivotal to a bunch of other benefits and being able to find other dealers.
Yes.
Or distributors. So because of the connections in Italy, we've had, we've brought on a distributor in Ireland and the UK.
Right.
We've also got one in Slovenia and Croatia. And it was also pivotal. We just recently had a meeting, and Joe was in Italy for the meeting with the CEO of Beam Global around some of the alignments that we got. There's a few meaty things to talk about here, but that's the alignments that we have with this NASDAQ listed business from America. We've got some really good, I guess, very exciting outcomes that we're working towards at the moment. But that's also pivotal because we were able to have that headquarters in Italy.
Yeah.
We do have a dealer network over there. Same thing, what I said before, with what our dealers are looking for in terms of the look and feel.
Yeah.
We've just appointed a dealer in Rome who's got 6 little outlets around Rome. But the same thing, led to us, and they said, look, we love everything you do. We love how you look. Can we just do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, you can do that. He says, this is what we do for walls, this is what we do for signs, this is what we do for posters and sort of the collateral we have within the shops.
Yeah.
So we try to make it easier for them as well.
Yeah.
That solutions sort of thinking doesn't just happen for customers, it happens both up and down the line.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing is, like, even Slovenia, one of our dealers and our distributor in Slovenia, they just basically said, I remember Joe was telling me they met him there in Italy, and they literally walked around the space and said, I want this there. And that's how it happens.
Yeah. I assume that when you look at that, okay, so you're Australian company, Australian based, but Europe is ahead of Australia in terms of electric vehicle uptake and all that. It seems to be sort of a little bit more advanced. As you say, Italy and Spain, huge markets for the scooters anyway. Is that where huge amounts of growth is expected to come for you?
I think there's some really challenging things that happen in Europe that don't happen here.
Yeah.
Okay. Number one, a climate.
Yeah.
So right now in Rome, it's like 0 degrees. I don't know how many people feel like riding a scooter is 0 degrees. Fair enough. You got those little sort of aprons that go over the front of the bike to try and keep the wind off you, and they got big wind screens, and they got some pretty significant climate challenges. But also there is one of the things that we probably take for granted here is we have garages. Like, being able to recharge our vehicles is actually quite simple. Even if you have like an EV car, you can just take it home and plug it in the wall and use a charging system.
Mm.
The challenge is for people who have on-street parking. It's like, how do they recharge these things? So their challenges are quite different. And also thinking about these places that are founded 2,000 years ago, they were thinking about little little horses and carts and donkeys and stuff like that, not like Teslas and all this other stuff. So they've got some pretty significant challenges there. You're right in the way that Europeans are very advanced. Like, in terms of, if you think about places like the Netherlands, right? Sorry, my apologies. I think about Norway.
Yes.
They have just immense EV uptake.
Mm.
The funny part is you always hear the rhetoric here back in Australia. I'm probably going to jump across the country, but you hear the rhetoric here in Australia. We've got to drive fast. This. I've got to be able to drive to Sydney.
Yeah.
No one ever drives to Sydney straight without taking a wee break.
Yes.
And most people just fly, because you're not going to take 10 hours or 11 hours to drive to Sydney. Like, I get the Aussie road trip idea.
Yeah.
But the thing that happens there on a daily basis is what is the average commute?
Mm.
The average commute in Norway is further than the average commute in Australia, and they don't find it a barrier.
Mm.
And they've also got challenges around climate as well. So I know a different product type, but they are leading from the front, I guess, in terms of they're quite progressive.
Europe is not the only place that you're moving into to sell your products, though, right?
Yeah, look, it's probably the first place. Well, we've also got trial products now in a handful of potential importers.
Mm-hmm.
We have some based in Asia, so Singapore, Hong Kong. We've also got some conversations happening for potentially the US.
Yeah, right.
But I think we spoke a little bit about the Beam Global, and I mentioned a little bit about those. So it might be worthwhile having a bit of a chat, because it's pretty exciting. So Beam Global is essentially a American company listed on the NASDAQ. They produce essentially like a solar charging system that's deployable. And what I mean by that is it's got a big solar panel and a big battery.
Mm.
And then they can then tailor a solution underneath that to charge whatever they want.
Mm.
Okay, you've created energy, you've stored it, let's use it.
Mm.
The systems are grid independent. So the large hurricane that's just gone through Florida a month or so ago, the only thing that had a light on was one of these beam units. And the funny part is I know they work in feet over there in inches, but they're waterproof to 9 feet, so 3 meters.
Mm-hmm.
The storm surge was at 2.5 meters.
Right.
And all you saw was the lights on, the solar panel and the battery pack still operational in a storm surge where everything else was taken out. They were grid-based. All we can have are these charging solutions that Beam work on are deployable because they're grid independent. They make their own power, they store it, they use it. You don't have the cost associated with having to dig a giant trench and putting a big cable in. You know, you can put these everywhere. So think about Australia, right? We have communities everywhere in Australia where we have to run a power cable off a grid to somewhere, or we've got to run a grid independent system. And these things are just, you can put them in and then you can use them for whatever you want.
Yeah.
So that's what Beam does. But what they've developed is one of these systems called the Beam Well. And the Beam Well is taking that established technology and applying it to having a water tank, a 3,000 litre water tank, and also a water desalination plant. And these beam wells are going to be deployed into areas that have had like critical infrastructure damage. And that could be because of, you know, climatic events like hurricane or cyclone, tornadoes. It could be because of a man-made event, so something like a war.
Yes.
Or some sort of civil conflict. The other piece of the puzzle with a beam well is it can create water because you can put, you know, the hose into some sort of brackish water or salty water, make fresh water to give to the people who live in the area that are affected. But the problem is there's no point in just having a tank.
Yes.
You've got to be able to move around, and this is where the mobility element is. And this is the exciting part for us. We've partnered with Beam Global to be their mobility partner. So each one of these beam wells that go out, they'll have 4 Benzina Zero duos or Benzina Zero haulers.
Yeah.
There as part of the mobility solution. These things will become hubs, and those hubs can then be where they can deliver aid or food or whatever, and then the scooters can go out and do what they need to do to be able to disperse that aid and food.
Yeah.
And it's extraordinary. It's very extraordinary. And
it's amazing.
The other exciting part about it is the first one is going to be deployed out of their Serbian factory on the 20th of December this year, so 2024, and it's going to Jordan en route to Gaza.
Wow.
So we're very excited about being able to partner with a company like Beam Global.
Yeah.
And we're very excited about what the potential is going to be with this, because we've got a whole bunch of the vehicles that we can use for their use cases.
Yeah.
And I think it's exciting for an Australian business. Here we are in Brisbane having a chat about these things that are happening on the other side of the world.
Sure. Yeah.
The funny part, I've said this joke a couple of times when I go off to meet with Domino's guys.
Yeah.
But it's like the only way I know that we're going to be able to go into places like that and have a reliable product is because we can deliver pizza on them every day of the week, because they have hard lives, and we can actually go out there and we can provide a product that's going to be amazingly field tested.
Yeah. This Beam Global thing, it's I know the news came out just couple of weeks ago, even 2-3 weeks ago. How does something like that come about? Did they search you out? Do you mind me asking about how such a partnership should develop?
Look, if there's a couple pieces to this.
Yeah.
Like the finding us in the first place is through a mutual connection that we had in the US. But having a connection is one thing. Having the trust to be able to then proceed after an introduction is the next thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, once again, when we first met Desmond, the CEO, we just basically sat there and go, okay, what are your challenges? What can we do? And once again, led with that sort of like, let's see how we can help you do what you need to do. The supplementary part of this is we can then leverage off. We work with these corporates. They already trust us. We already do the right thing. We're already compliant. We can do what you need because they already believe in us. And that carries a lot of weight into having those conversations. And naturally, like there's in a world where we try and do video meetings and that sort of stuff, there's no replacement for. It was only 2 weeks ago that Joe was in Italy at our HQ there, and Desmond flew in, and they got to meet each other face to face for the first time, and they were able to work through everything. And you know, there's a little video of Desmond riding around on one of the duos that are going to be going into the Gaza area. in our HQ in Italy, which is nothing short of astonishing, really. But there's one of those things where, you know, I think we really punch above our weight in what we offer, both from a product and a services sort of perspective. So, but we're very excited to see where that goes. Like, there's some pretty extraordinary numbers that we've been talking about. Like, there's a goal of getting 1,000 units of these beam wells into that area, and they're deployable everywhere. You know, even in Australia, the Victorian government just recently put out a fund to basically bring in infrastructure that's quickly deployable to provide access to clean water and energy. The system is purpose built for that.
Yeah.
And then there's other solutions where, you know, we can take that system, the beam system, and they're going through a process at the moment to do a rideshare system in another country. And they've come, okay, let's have a look at what we can do with our e-bikes. And the hauler is going to be part of that process, because the hauler is dual purpose. Instead of most rideshares, those bikes just look the same. This bike's going to be set up for both kids' seats and being able to carry cargo and all sorts of stuff. So it's going to be much more diversified.
Right.
There is a humanitarian element to this, which is really important to us as well. Like, it's great to have like the headline story, but at the end of the day, there's people in need. They need these things. You know, they need access to water and food, and if we can be a part of that, like that's also a very, like, I don't know, heartwarming part of it, I guess, that we can provide a solution in these terrible situations.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, obviously the absolute best of luck with that. I hope that all goes fantastically well. So I wanted to sort of head towards wrapping things up with your take on the electrification of mobility in Australia in general. So obviously you're deeply involved with it in one particular sector. Most people, when they think of electric mobility, they'll probably think of electric cars. That's the headline grabber often, is the whatever new things coming from BYD or Chery or whatever. So that you obviously would keep your eye on that sector. So what is your take on the wider EV market? Sales leveling off or plateauing, or that seems to be, you know, some chatter about that. Do you think that things will just keep growing? Do you consider the electric car market at all when you think about your own business?
Look, I'd buy an EV. Like, I don't have an EV car right now, but I can tell you what, it's the next thing on the shopping list.
Yeah.
Look, what's going to happen is it's like everything. Everything just doesn't go just in a straight line up.
Sure.
You know, there's peaks and troughs. If we go back and think about EVs, like the headlines right now is the depreciation on EVs are horrible.
Yes.
You know what happened in 2020 and 2021 when no one could get everything? Everything got really expensive, and now we come back to normality.
Yeah.
So, you know, people aren't paying $100,000 for a Tesla Model 3 because they couldn't get one. You can go buy one for $60-something thousand. Like, that's going to create a disparity in, you know, what happens from a depreciation perspective. The EV sales are going to continue to grow, and you'll measure this by, you know, what's the likelihood of someone buying an EV and going back? And there's plenty of reports where people going, "There's no way I'm going to get another ICE car or anything like that." I've got to tell you a story about one of our postie contractors, because he's an awesome bloke. He's a guy by the name of Brett. He's one of our trial guys that we've been working with. He's based over in Perth, and he's been a long time contractor. He has a handful of runs around the Perth area, and he called me and he goes, I'd like to try a Duo Plus. We're like, sure, that's cool. We've been working with him very closely for feedback and, like, you know, the tyres conversation, just listening to what the challenges are and how can we help make his run easier. And he called me one day, and, you know, you get the phone call, you look at the phone, and you're like, oh, I hope there's no issue here, you know? And he goes, Ben, I just had to call you. I'm like, okay, is everything okay? And he's like, yeah, everything's okay, except I had to use my old Honda postie bike yesterday because I had to do someone else's run, and I didn't use my Duo on that run. I had to do the other bike, and I hated the postie bike.
Wow.
And I was thinking about that. Like, obviously, we would be excited about that sort of feedback, but sometimes you got to go back to realize how far you've come forward.
Yeah.
You know, when he rattled off the reasons, like it was hot and it was slow and it was noisy and it was uncomfortable to sit on, it's like, okay. he's also realized there's some really good merits here. Obviously, ergonomics is one thing, but it was just quiet. Loved it being quiet. And these are things that won't, like, no one's ever said, "Oh, I want it to be noisier." Yeah. I know that there's the V8. Well, like there's that sort of like motorsport level. I get that, but most people driving their kids to school couldn't care less if their car emitted a noise or not.
Yeah,
I certainly don't. I think it's going to simplify a lot of things. I know it's a big challenge. I know through like the Motor Trades Association, they're gearing up to what happens next when it comes to training and maintenance and what does after sales look like for the industry. But I think there's going to be some simplicity. But I think we are actually missing one of the most important narratives around EVs, and is that it's great to just get a vehicle that no longer has a petrol or combustion motor in it. But we actually haven't fixed the most fundamental challenge that we've got in a city environment, and that is congestion. And we only actually fix that issue by downsizing or right-sizing our mobility type. Just sit there on any major road going to the city of, I'm sure, any city, and you just see single occupant car trips.
Yeah.
They can be displaced. Look, they can be displaced by, transport systems like trains and buses. But people who don't have access to that or want independent mobility, it's already here.
Yeah.
It could be an e-bike, it could be an e-scooter, it could be an e-moped. That is how we beat congestion. And I think I hope that's going to continue to grow. I know there's a big uptake in e-bikes, especially around that. Low barriers to entry with like no rego, no license, consistent rules.
Yes, that helps.
But the other part of the EV sector, which is probably not, for the average person who's excited about the car side of stuff, is heavy transport. And there's certainly some massive challenges around decarbonising. But I saw literally today a company, Janus, which does a whole bunch of retrofitting of electric motors to trucks.
Yes.
They've just launched their first road train. Mm-hmm. Like, this is extraordinary. Battery electric road train. You can look at other companies like Fortescue that are really leading into those big displacement dump trucks that you see. The thing is a Tonka toy. Those things are electric and autonomous. Like, I think it's incredibly exciting. But it will go through peaks and troughs. And we need to, when you look at the headlines, we just need to probably dig a little bit deeper, because there's always a vested interest somewhere.
Yes. Okay. Excellent. So, last question around Benzina Zero. What's the future hold? Where are things headed? Where do you? The cheesy old high school question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years? What's the trajectory?
Look for us. We just want to continue with what we're doing from a consumer perspective, providing the best quality product to people to use. And it could be, it could be a fleet application, or it could just be, someone who enjoys riding their bike on the weekends. It's as simple as that. What we want to see, or what we hope to see, is obviously the continued expansion of our global dealer network, our distributor network, and then dealers underneath that.
Yeah.
We'd love to see those corporate alliances that we have, like with Domino's, manifest themselves into all the other countries that we're working through at the moment. And obviously, we couldn't be more excited to see what happens with the Beam.
Yeah.
The Beam side of stuff. And we can't wait to keep partnering with them and providing these amazing solutions deployable.
I mean, I know it's been a hard work and a busy 5 years, but can you believe where things have got to?
I look pretty fresh for a 22-year-old. Well, no, look, there's definitely some challenges, new industry, new business, and all this sort of stuff. But I think the big thing is we're a very fortunate little team. Like, we're a small team.
Yeah.
We can do a lot. We're very mobile, like in terms of we can pivot and change and that sort of stuff. We don't have big, slow, clunky structures.
Yeah.
My business partner, Joe, is an absolute asset in every form of the word asset. He's obviously got a huge amount of experience, but we're all incredibly capable of what we do. And that's what I think makes us very special.
Yeah. Great. Just two more things. Now, these are surprise questions.
Still bonus questions.
Supplementary questions. But as we are a car channel,
yes,
I like to ask my guests about the cars that they own, and more specifically, cars that they would own. So, tell me, what car do you currently drive? And secondly, if money were no object, what car would you own?
I currently drive a Discovery 4. because I go camping a lot with my family.
Right.
And I've had a couple Land Rovers. I've got the scars to prove it. I will preface though that I was a massive fan of Italian stuff, and I still am. I grew up in the Alpha Club. So I've had 7 Alfa Romeos. My parents are still in the Alpha Club.
Nice.
If money was no object, there's just so many different cars, isn't there?
I'm going to have to put you on the spot,
You know,
Ben. I'm sorry.
I don't know. I think you know what it is? It's like if lifestyle was no object, it's more different because now I've got a family. I've got 3 kids. Like if money no job, no object, I've still got a family. For me, if I could ever get a sports car, it'd be like the Ferrari 458.
Okay.
But they're just beautiful.
Okay.
But to be honest, like I'd be happy. I don't know. I'm actually not. I'm not so driven in some of these things. If I could just get in a car. Maybe this is my Land Rover challenges. If we could just get in the car and I could just go somewhere without a challenge, it'd be great. But no, I love it. I do love my disco. I really love my disco. But it's just one of those things. I actually don't know. Ferrari 458. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll settle for the Ferrari 458. Excellent. All right. Well, Ben, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me out on Motoring Chronicles. Thanks so much.
Thanks for reaching out. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Excellent.